This episode is an ESL listening practice for intermediate learners. You will hear a natural conversation with clear pronunciation and everyday English. No tests, no pressure, just listening. Let's start.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We are jumping straight into a really profound collection of sources that you brought forward. Material that I think gets to the heart of one of the biggest emotional mysteries of our time. You tacked us with looking into this paradox of modern emptiness. And it's this really strange, nagging feeling where, on paper, life is good. People have success, material comfort, jobs, endless entertainment.
Right, all the metrics are pointing in.
Exactly. We have a level of technological ease it's totally unprecedented in human history. And yet, so many people just feel chronically exhausted, disconnected, and hollow.
It's a real disconnect, isn't it, between the external reality and the internal feeling?
It's a huge cognitive dissonance. When you think about it, we've solved so many of the big historical struggles. For many of us, survival isn't a daily question. Information is basically free, goods are abundant, and still that deep sense of satisfaction just isn't there.
The ease is maxed out.
The opportunities seem boundless, but the emptiness just sticks around. And this feeling, it's everywhere. It cuts across all demographics, all income brackets. So the core question in these sources is just so critical. Is this some kind of personal failure? Or is the environment itself, the very architecture of modern society, somehow rigged against us feeling satisfied? Okay, let's unpack this.
And that is exactly the conflict the sources dive into. And I think the most important thing they offer right up front is a kind of relief.
Okay.
The emptiness is not a personal failure. They're very clear on this. This widespread feeling of fatigue and hollowness.
Okay.
It's a direct, you could even say a measurable side effect of how modern life is structured.
So it's a feature, not a bug.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
We have, collectively but mostly unconsciously built a system that prizes convenience and speed above everything else.
Right. Frictionless is the goal.
Frictionless is the goal. But the sources argue, and I think really compellingly, that this design choice making everything as easy as possible, it necessarily leads to minimal depth. You can't really have both.
You can't have both.
No. One pushes the other out. Frictionless convenience and profound depth are almost opposing forces.
So our mission today is to get surgical.
That's the plan. We need to pull out the specific mechanisms. What are the structural errors, the psychological trade-offs that explain why convenience keeps replacing meaning? We're going to trace 6 core ways the modern world gives us this superficial engagement instead of real internal satisfaction.
Okay.
We'll look at everything from the attention economy to the anxiety of having way too much choice. This is really about understanding the systemic architecture of dissatisfaction. So you can, start to intentionally push back against it.
I love that phrase, the systemic architecture of dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
And I can't think of a better place to start than where most of our dissatisfaction seems to come from these days, our screens. The first big trade-off the sources identify is this shift from seeking fulfillment to just settling for constant stimulation. And the evidence for this is, it's overwhelming. Our mind's busy every single waking moment. It's phones, notifications, those short-form video loops, the infinite scroll.
The engine is always running.
The engine is always running, but at this low background hum. And it's not deep work or hard study. It's just keeping the brain occupied. The sources make this crystal clear distinction. Being busy like that is not the same as being satisfied. It's just distraction.
And that distinction is everything, because distraction is the absolute enemy of depth. Fulfillment, real satisfaction, it comes from sustained, purposeful effort. The reward is internal. It's that feeling of mastery or a real connection.
Right.
Constant stimulation, though, it works on immediate external rewards. A little dopamine hit from a nuke, like a funny video, a shocking headline.
It's a quick fix.
It's a quick fix. And psychologically, our brains get rewired for it. We become optimized for novelty and speed. The sources point out that when your mind is just constantly being fed this external stuff, it literally loses the ability for internal processing.
So you're just reacting all day.
You're just reacting. You become dependent on the next notification to tell you how to feel instead of, your own purpose or values guiding you. And this creates a state of just chronic, low-grade exhaustion. It's a mental fatigue that feels like you've done something meaningful, but really you've just burned all your cognitive fuel switching from one tiny thing to the next.
That idea of context switching is so key here. Reading the sources, I realized we've basically accepted this massive cognitive tax just for being connected.
A tax is a great way to put it.
Every time you switch from, say, working on a spreadsheet to answering a text, then you quickly check the news, and then you try to get back to the spreadsheet, your brain doesn't just flip a switch instantly. It has to, reload the entire context of what you were doing before.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're doing that hundreds of times a day, which we are...
Oh, easily.
We're spending huge amounts of mental energy just shuffling the deck, not actually playing the hand. We're not investing in deep thought.
Exactly. And the sources use this really powerful analogy for it. Attention is currency.
Okay.
So if you're spending tiny fractions of a penny on 1,000 different fleeting things at once, a micro investment in every single notification, then none of those things can hold any real psychological value.
They're all worthless.
They're all worthless.
Yeah.
The sheer volume of these little micro responses just dilutes our focus so much that anything profound, anything that requires, say, 30 minutes of uninterrupted focus, it starts to feel impossible.
Yeah.
Overwhelming. Too slow.
Right, or just boring.
Yeah. And this trade-off is often totally invisible. We confuse that feeling of being mentally drained at the end of the day with having lived a full, meaningful day. But so often, it's an exhaustion that comes from shallow engagement, not deep accomplishment. And as the sources say, if you never rest your attention, you never build up the reserves you need for real fulfillment.
So if the constant stimulation is the input problem, then this next piece, the absence of silence, that feels like the processing problem. I found this part of the sources just incredibly insightful. Silence used to be a totally normal, unavoidable part of being human.
It was the default state.
It was the default. Waiting for water to boil, walking from your car to the office, even just sitting in a room before a meeting starts. There were these natural, unprogrammed gaps of quiet.
Sure.
If there's a 60-second gap, we instinctively, it's almost a defensive reflex, we reach for the phone to fill that void. The sources point out that silence isn't a neutral state anymore. For many of us, it feels actively uncomfortable. It feels like boredom or anxiety that has to be, stamped out immediately.
And that discomfort, that's the alarm bell. That's the signal that our inner life is eroding. The sources draw a direct causal line here. Without silence, reflection disappears.
Okay, define reflection in this context.
So reflection isn't just idle daydreaming. It's the critical process of synthesis. It's the mental space where raw experience gets processed into your personal story. It's where you identify your values, where you translate events into learning and wisdom.
It's where you make sense of things.
It's where you make sense of things. If that space for internal processing is immediately filled by an external input, a playlist, a podcast, a social feed, you never actually digest your own life. You just become a perpetual consumption machine, always reacting to the world instead of internalizing it, analyzing it, and shaping your own understanding of it.
But okay, let me push back on that a little bit. Isn't listening to a podcast or maybe an audiobook sometimes a form of reflection? We're actively taking in information, often educational stuff. Doesn't that count?
That's a really fair challenge, and the sources actually anticipate that. They make a distinction between what they call passive absorption and active synthesis.
Okay.
Listening to something educational is fantastic input, but true reflection requires output. It requires a quiet mind to wrestle with that input, to connect it to what you already know, to apply it to your own life, and to decide what parts to keep and what to throw away.
So it's a two-step process.
It's a two-step process, and we're only doing step one. If you're constantly running from the void of silence, you're basically avoiding the moment where you have to face yourself and your own experiences without a script.
Yeah.
And depth, which is the antidote to all this emptiness, is impossible if you never give your inner life the quiet space it needs to surface and do its work.
Yeah.
You can stay busy and informed forever, but you'll also be deeply ungrounded and unsure of what actually matters to you. That's the real cost of getting rid of silence.
That connects so perfectly to the next point, the social one. Because if we're running from ourselves, how can we possibly connect deeply with other people? We've traded real human connection for a digital substitute, and the sources point out this really painful, defining irony of our time. We communicate more than ever at a scale and speed that's just mind-boggling, yet we feel more alone than ever.
This is where the very tools we use for efficiency, text messages, likes, platform metrics, they completely betray our fundamental biological needs.
How so?
Well, humans evolved over millions of years to connect through shared physical space, through complex nonverbal cues. Now we're trying to solve this deeply biological problem of isolation with these highly efficient but totally context-free digital tools.
Right.
Just look at the substitutes. The sources detail. Messages replace conversations. They're fast, sure, but they have none of the tone, the nuance, the shared vulnerability of a real-time spoken exchange.
Likes replace presence.
Likes replace presence. It's scalable validation, but it vanishes in a second, and it requires zero real investment from the person giving it. And maybe most importantly, our online personas replace our authentic selves.
So the digital interaction gives us this illusion of connection.
Yes, an illusion.
Without demanding any of the real effort or the risk.
Right.
We get that quick hit of social validation without the messy, time-consuming reality of, navigating a conflict or sharing a comfortable silence or just being emotionally present with someone.
Exactly. These are shallow substitutes. And they completely fail to meet our deeper emotional needs.
Yeah.
The sources are so clear about what humans actually need to feel resilient and connected. Eye contact, shared silence, physical presence, and the genuine co-regulation of our emotions that can only happen when two people are in the same room committing their time and attention to each other.
Right.
What's fascinating here is the trade-off. It's speed and scale versus the psychological necessity of physical presence. Digital communication is scalable. You can broadcast a thought and get approval from 1,000 people at once.
Sure.
But the sources show that this kind of communication has no weight. It's light, it's easy to produce, and it's just as easy to ignore.
And when you compare that to real connection, the kind that actually builds communities and creates emotional safety, it's so inefficient.
It has to be inefficient.
It requires a slow pace, shared meals, listening without planning what you're going to say next. It requires being physically there.
And it requires vulnerability. When you're interacting with an online persona, and let's be honest, most of us have a carefully curated, optimized version of ourselves online, you're engaging with performance, a performance designed to get approval. And that approval, the like or the positive comment, it's such a poor temporary substitute for being truly seen and accepted.
So you're not actually being seen.
No. The problem, as the sources put it, is that you aren't being seen and accepted for who you are, flaws and all. You're being rewarded for who you pretend to be. And that dynamic guarantees this continuous unmet need for connection. You always feel isolated because the validation is going to the mask, not to you. The very technology we think is connecting us actually acts as a shield against the depth we need for real intimacy.
Wow. The shield of the persona guarantees the isolation. That's powerful. Okay, let's shift from that struggle for connection to the internal scorecards we use to define our own value. Part 2 of this deep dive is on our worth metrics, and this, to me, contains maybe the most devastating structural flaw the sources identified, the industrialization of self-worth.
Yes. The sources argue that modern life, especially since the Industrial Revolution, completely changed how we measure value. We collectively decided that productivity should replace purpose as the main way we measure our own worth. And that is such a profound cultural diagnosis. Society has built this incredibly elaborate reward system, salaries, promotions, status, all that, that only values one thing: measured output.
How much can you produce?
Right. It rewards how much you generate, how well you hit these externally defined targets, how busy you look. It rewards being busy and being efficient, not being fulfilled or grounded in your own values.
And the tragedy is we internalize it.
We completely internalize it. Our self-worth becomes tangled up with our economic function, with our measurable output. We start to define ourselves not by our character or our relationships or some mission we've chosen, but by our annual performance review or how many items we checked off our to-do list today.
Okay, but I feel like I have to play devil's advocate here. Isn't productivity necessary? I mean, how do we build things, cure diseases, or feed billions of people without maximizing productivity? Are the sources saying we should all just stop working hard?
That's a really essential question, and the sources give a nuanced answer. They are absolutely not arguing against hard work or efficiency.
Oh, okay.
They're arguing against making productivity the sole determinant of our internal value. Productivity is necessary for a functioning society. Purpose is necessary for a functioning self.
So it's about the why.
It's all about the why. It's about the direction of the motivation. If your motivation is purely external money, a promotion, status, then your sense of value is fragile. It depends on the system. If you lose your job, you lose your sense of self.
Right.
But if you're engaged in productive work that's tied to an internal, durable purpose, like a passion for teaching or a commitment to craftsmanship, then the work itself, even when it's hard, sustains you. The work is just the way you express your purpose. It isn't the purpose itself.
That makes sense, because you can be constantly doing things, checking off lists, hitting goals, going to meetings, and still have that feeling like you're just spinning your wheels.
Yes.
All that activity isn't actually tethered to anything that gives your life meaning outside of the system that created the task in the first place.
Exactly.
There's that one quote from the sources that just perfectly captures this cultural failure. We were taught how to work, not how to feel alive.
It just summarizes the entire educational and cultural blind spot of our society. We become excellent cogs in the machine, optimized, efficient, measured, but we never learn the internal architecture of satisfaction.
Right.
And if the only value you think you have is tied to your ability to produce widgets or answer emails, then any moment you are not producing, you feel this crushing guilt or anxiety or worthlessness.
It's that should be working feeling.
Yeah, it's that constant should be working feeling. And this metric shift creates this frantic cycle of just activity for activity's sake. We're terrified to pause because pausing means we might have to face the possibility that our output is all we are. And that fear stops us from asking the most important question: why am I even doing this? If the output doesn't serve a deep internal purpose, the sources guarantee the outcome. Productivity without purpose leads straight to burnout. You're left with a big, empty pile of achievements that feel completely meaningless.
And as if that pressure to produce wasn't enough, we're also crippled by the sheer number of things we could be doing. This brings us to the anxiety of endless possibility, or what people usually call choice overload. On the surface, this feels like the ultimate modern luxury, right? We have endless options in careers, relationships, lifestyles, even what kind of coffee to drink. And logically, you'd think more options equals more freedom, which should mean more happiness.
It should.
But the sources just pick apart this paradox. Endless options don't create freedom, they create paralyzing anxiety.
This is where a concept from economics, opportunity cost, becomes this huge psychological burden. If you have, say, 5 objectively good career paths in front of you, choosing one means you are actively sacrificing the potential success and experience of the other 4.
And that feels like a loss.
It feels like a massive loss before you've even started. And that realization is what drives this modern fear of commitment.
Totally.
When everything feels possible, picking a single path feels like this high-stakes, permanent, risky decision. The internal monologue is just relentless. Why settle for a perfectly good job when the perfect job, the one tailored exactly to me, might be just one more application away? Why commit to this good relationship when my soulmate might still be out there in the dating app universe?
So we get stuck in this, like, a permanent state of window shopping.
That's a great way to put it.
We keep one foot out the door, always waiting for more data, hoping the perfect option will just reveal itself without any risk. And the result is we do nothing. We're just stuck.
Total stasis.
So many people are just frozen, paralyzed by this search for the perfect path that never shows up because they're terrified of choosing wrong. They're running this continuous optimization algorithm in their heads, but the data set is infinite, so the algorithm never gives an answer. We're perpetually preparing to live, but never actually living.
And the sources have this really devastating conclusion about that paralysis. They make it clear that the fear of choosing wrong often makes us miss out on the fulfillment that choosing anything would have brought us. Because commitment itself, just the act of choosing, regardless of how it turns out,
Right.
that's the mechanism that forges meaning.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. The central counterintuitive idea from the sources is that having fewer options might actually lead to more psychological freedom. How does committing to limits make you more free?
It sounds like a total paradox, but it's foundational to happiness. Meaning comes from commitment, not from endless possibility. Freedom, in this context, isn't the ability to keep every door open forever. It's the freedom to pour yourself completely into one chosen path, accepting the limits, the sacrifices, and the imperfections that come with that choice.
So commitment is the engine.
Commitment is the engine of depth. It's how we move from the hypothetical world of potential, where everything is flawless but none of it is real, into the messy, concrete reality of making an impact and growing. If you stay uncommitted, just standing on the doorstep of all possibilities, you're choosing to live a life that's very wide but incredibly shallow.
You're dipping your toe in 100 pools, but never actually swimming.
Never swimming deep in one. The anxiety of choice overload is, at its root, the anxiety being perpetually unfinished and unrealized. And the only way to get past it is through dedicated action, by embracing imperfection and accepting limits. By limiting your choices, by saying no to 1,000 things, you're actually freeing up all your resources, your time, your attention, your energy, to say a huge, powerful yes to the one thing that truly matters.
That just forces a total reevaluation of what freedom even means. It's not freedom to wait, it's freedom to dedicate.
Okay, let's transition now to what the sources call the comfort trap.
Yeah.
This is the modern obsession with removing struggle and friction from our lives. Part 3 is all about how designing discomfort out of our lives actually robs them of meaning.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the design philosophy behind everything now, from our kitchen appliances to how we plan cities. It's all engineered to remove discomfort. We've got instant food delivery, climate control that keeps us at a perfect temperature, endless, frictionless entertainment on tap.
Problems postponed.
All problems postponed or eliminated. We have built a world where friction, struggle, and patience are seen as the enemy.
And by getting rid of the enemy, we've accidentally gotten rid of a crucial ally. The sources really hammer this point about the forgotten function of resistance.
Struggle gives life necessary contrast. If you never experience difficulty, if every task is optimized to be easy, if you never have to earn something through sustained, uncomfortable effort, then when the achievement finally comes, it feels flat. It feels empty.
It's like a video game on easy mode.
Exactly. This is a classic evolutionary mismatch. We've built a world that satisfies our immediate primal desire for comfort, but it fails to satisfy our deeper human need for competence, for growth, for challenge. We've minimized discomfort from physical exertion to enduring an awkward conversation because we have this flawed belief that comfort equals happiness.
And we know that's not true. I mean, look at people who dedicate themselves to really hard things. Running a marathon, learning a complex instrument, mastering a trade. The process is painful.
Of course.
But the satisfaction they get from that sustained effort, it's so much deeper and more durable than the fleeting comfort of just avoiding it.
Precisely. What we've really done is we've eliminated the very mechanism that gives achievement its value.
Yeah.
If I press a button and get instant gratification, whether that's a meal or the answer to a question, there's almost no psychological reward there. It's just consumption.
Right.
But if I struggle for months or even years to master a difficult skill, the reward is deep and holistic, and it's mine. The value of the achievement is directly proportional to the resistance I had to overcome to get it.
And the sources argue the consequences of avoiding all that are pretty severe. By always taking the path of least resistance, we're fundamentally stunting our own growth.
They state it so plainly. Growth requires resistance. And this isn't just, a nice philosophical idea. It's a biological and psychological law. A muscle only grows when it meets enough resistance, a weight, that it's forced to repair and adapt.
Same with our minds.
Absolutely. A mind only grows when it wrestles with a difficult, messy idea or faces a problem you can't just solve with a quick search. If you only feed the brain easy, pre-chewed information, it starts to atrophy.
We do that all the time.
All the time. By opting for the easy path in every part of our lives, avoiding difficult conversations, putting off challenging projects, only consuming easy media, we are actively chipping away at our own capacity for meaningful achievement. We're choosing short-term comfort over long-term development. And the sources also point out that if you never have to tolerate frustration, your frustration tolerance shrinks. Your ability to stick with something hard just vanishes, which means that when a real, unavoidable challenge comes along, we're totally unprepared. And that just cycles back to that feeling of helpless hollowness.
The pursuit of a frictionless life removes the very gradient we need to measure our own progress and feel proud. If everything is easy, then nothing is truly difficult, and therefore nothing is truly rewarding. We're trading self-respect that's born from effort for the soft sedation of convenience. So we've talked about physical and intellectual resistance. The sources also talk about temporal resistance, our relationship with time and limits. Earlier generations lived with this really sharp daily awareness that life is fragile and finite.
And today, we've built this incredibly elaborate filtration system designed to hide our own mortality from ourselves.
How do you mean?
Well, think about where death happens now. It's mostly hidden away in institutions, out of sight from daily life. Aging is something to be filtered, masked, aggressively postponed with medicine and cosmetics. Decline is denied.
We don't want to see it.
We don't want to see it. And this constant filtering, this constant postponement of the ultimate limit, it's supposed to save us from anxiety. But it has this profound and catastrophic side effect: the loss of urgency. The sources argue that without a constant low-level awareness of limits of mortality, of time running out, and urgency just evaporates, we stop prioritizing things because on some subconscious level, we feel like we have all the time in the world to get to the important stuff later.
Right. If you can hear the clock ticking in the background, you're motivated to act, to prioritize the deep, meaningful work. But if we've managed to muffle that clock, we give ourselves permission to procrastinate forever, to stay stuck in choice overload, to keep scrolling, because, hey, we can always start really live tomorrow. Exactly.
But the challenge there, the real irony, is that while we're avoiding the thought of death, we're actually avoiding life. We're spending these limited, finite moments we have on things that don't give us any meaning because we've conceptually inflated the amount of time we think we have left.
That's it, exactly. And this is the core lesson that ties all these threads together.
Yeah.
Without urgency, meaning fades away. Because knowing that your time is limited is what gives life its weight. If life feels endless, if everything can just be done tomorrow or next year or in retirement, then the value and the required commitment of this present moment just plummets, meaning requires the pressure of scarcity, and time is the ultimate scarce resource.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the removal of both physical struggle, the resistance we need to grow, and temporal limits, the awareness of mortality, it just fundamentally cheapens the experience of being alive. We're living in this highly optimized, low-stakes world. But the sources suggest that the human spirit, evolutionarily, psychologically, is built to seek high stakes and high effort, even while our bodies are craving comfort and ease. When your inner self recognizes the stakes have been set artificially low, the result is that empty, unsatisfied feeling.
That structural setup, high convenience, low meaning, that leads us right to the core diagnosis of the modern condition. We should probably summarize that before we get into the solutions.
Good idea.
So let's just restate the central failure the sources identified. Modern life promised us happiness, but it only delivered convenience. And by focusing so obsessively on making things easy, it failed to deliver on that deeper promise. And while convenience is great for, a certain level of comfort, the sources are crystal clear that it is structurally incapable of providing meaning.
And this brings us right back to you, the listener, who might be feeling successful on paper but empty inside. The source offers this really crucial clarity and reassurance. The emptiness is not caused by a lack of external success. It is caused by a lack of depth.
And that's a huge reframing.
It's a profound reframing, because we're all conditioned to believe the emptiness is a quantity problem. If I just get the next promotion or save more money or get more status, the feeling will go away.
Yeah.
But if those milestones were reached on the path of least resistance, or if they're only defined by those external productivity metrics, they will always feel hollow. They lack the necessary depth, the connection to an internal, durable purpose. The exhaustion comes from chasing a quantity of things that have no internal quality.
So if the diagnosis is a lack of depth, then the prescription has to be a deliberate, active pivot away from this ingrained cycle of convenience and towards sustained effort. The sources don't just identify the problem, they offer a clear, actionable path to feeling whole again. And it starts with a shift in philosophy from just doing to consciously caring. The sources argue that meaning doesn't come from doing more stuff, but from increasing the quality of your emotional investment in the stuff you do. Meaning doesn't come from doing more tasks, but from caring more about the few tasks you actually commit to.
Which reorients everything.
It reorients everything away from measuring external performance and toward investing intensely in things that matter deeply to us, whether or not they have a measurable external output.
So the path back to wholeness, then, is about intentionally engineering friction back into your life. The practical solutions the sources outline are, on the surface, very simple to list, but they're profoundly disruptive to our modern comfort cycle. They require active choice and a willingness to be uncomfortable.
Okay, what are they?
First, we need fewer distractions. This means actively reclaiming silence and your own attention, turning off the noise, prioritizing periods of deep, uninterrupted focus and internal reflection. It's about setting boundaries against the attention economy.
Okay, that's one.
Second, we need deeper relationships. This means prioritizing physical presence, vulnerability, and sustained attention over digital efficiency. It means choosing quality time with one or two people over scalable communication with dozens. It means accepting the messiness of real human interaction over the smooth performance of online life.
Right, leaning into the inefficiency.
Exactly. Third, we need real effort. This translates to seeking out purposeful discomfort and resistance. It means moving toward challenging activities, intellectual, emotional, physical, not away from them. If something is difficult, the sources suggest that's precisely why you should do it, because it builds the internal contrast you need to feel value. And fourth, we need honest reflection. We have to create and protect that quiet space for our minds to process, to synthesize, to define our purpose. And that's what anchors all our productive activity to something internal and durable, rather than something external and temporary.
Right.
And for anyone listening who really identifies with this feeling of modern emptiness, you have to understand this final point from the sources, that empty feeling isn't evidence that you're broken or flawed. It is a powerful, essential signal.
A signal of what?
It's your inner self reminding you that you were built for more than just survival and scrolling and efficiency. It's a prompt to see complexity and difficulty, because that is the only place where true, durable meaning can actually be found.
So what does this all mean? It means convenience is a useful tool for logistics, but it's a psychological poison if you mistake it for a life goal. It means actively choosing depth and resistance over the passive comfort that convenience offers us. This is about making deliberate, small choices every day to engineer friction back into your life where it matters most. In your attention, in your relationships, and in your commitments.
This deep dive has really laid out a clear roadmap of the structural trade-offs that we've all unconsciously accepted. We traded reflection for constant stimulation, purpose for productivity, deep connection for shallow scale, growth for comfort, and urgency for mortality avoidance.
Yeah.
To summarize the 6 big drivers of modern emptiness: constant distraction stops us from thinking deeply. Prioritizing productivity over purpose leads straight to burnout. Relying on shallow connection leaves our real emotional needs unmet. Choice. Anxiety paralyzes us from making commitments. Excessive comfort removes the struggle we need for growth. And avoiding the reality of mortality eliminates the urgency that gives life its weight.
The ultimate takeaway from all this material is simple, but it's demanding. To feel whole, we have to choose difficulty, commit to a path, and care intensely about that chosen path. And we have to accept that convenience is mostly just a distraction from the real work of living a meaningful life. Now, for our final provocative thought for you, the learner, who brought us this phenomenal material. We spent a lot of time on the anxiety of choice overload, the paralysis it causes, and the urgency that comes from knowing our time is limited. We established that meaning is found in commitment. So we challenge you to identify one major commitment. It could be a change at work, starting a serious creative project, fully committing to a complex relationship. One thing you have been putting off for months or maybe even years. You've been delaying it not because it wasn't a good path, but because you were paralyzed by that search for the perfect path. Or you were afraid of choosing wrong and sacrificing other possibilities. Use this new awareness that time is limited to drive urgency toward depth. What is one concrete, irreversible step you can take this week to move from the world of endless possibility into the world of concrete commitment? Pick the path and commit to the friction.
Thank you so much for sharing these powerful and timely sources with us. We really hope this deep dive into the architecture of modern dissatisfaction helps you and all our listeners start to build a more meaningful framework for life by choosing depth over convenience.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.